A movie starring George Clooney in space? What could go wrong?
We have to go, go! If you don't detach, that arm's gonna carry you too far!
Okay, maybe a few things. The Midnight Sky, Netflix's latest sci-fi film based off the book Good Morning Midnight, is a bleak tale about love, loss, and what happened to Jyn Erso before she joined the rebellion. In this video, we'll be taking a deep dive into its twist ending, what the catastrophic event was, and many of the film's hidden Easter eggs and clues. So strap into your spacesuits, boot up some Sweet Caroline, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because here we go. Welcome to the Barbeau Observatory, a fictitious science facility located in the Arctic Circle. As we can tell from the many jackets, computer stations, and large cafeteria, this is a lab meant for a substantial amount of scientists. The camera lingers on an odd figurine of the Egyptian god Anubis, the patron god of lost souls and the helpless, and that's exactly who remains as the last person at the observatory. Not Anubis, meet Dr. Augustine Lofthouse, a famous astronomer and scientist spending his last remaining days on Earth, lost, helpless, and alone at this research base. He meanders about, getting drunk, listening to Chris Stapleton's Tennessee whiskey, ironically drinking whiskey.
What are you drinking?
Whiskey.
This is a man who has nothing to live for. In fact, when the base is evacuated due to a catastrophic event, all the scientists leave for home while Augustine opts to stay behind.
They all want to be home. Where's that? For you, I guess that's here.
The year is 2049, and a catastrophic event has decimated most of the world, covering it in deep plumes of radiation. The film never says what this event was, but judging by the radiation imagery Augustine tracks on his computer, and the fact Mitchell tells Addie later on in the film that humanity can, quote, do better this time, it's implied that this event was man-made and likely some sort of nuclear war. There's even a point in which Sullivan tries to contact China, India, and Russia, which is explicitly forbidden, so relations with these countries probably not the greatest in 2049. Never mentioned in the film is Augustine's ailment. He suffers from a condition that requires him to constantly transfuse his blood, and he does so while looking up at the midnight sky. There's something eerily poignant to the fact he is receiving blood while staring up at the stars where his actual blood, his daughter Iris, is, but that's part of the film's twist, and we'll get into that in a bit. In a flashback, we meet young Augustine giving a presentation about a newly found moon orbiting Jupiter called K23. A moon due to its thermal volcanic activity could sustain life. This will become Augustine's obsession. He'll even place his work before everything else, his one big regret in life. He's so focused on finding life in the stars, he's forgotten the life he's had on Earth. We see him develop a relationship with a woman named Jean Sullivan, and as we're introduced to more and more of his flashbacks, we'll see how his relationships shatter the more he becomes focused on work.
You want to be an explorer, Augustine, to discover new worlds, to give life some hope. But while you're doing all that, your own life is just slipping away.
Back at Barbeau, Augustine tries to contact the only active space mission, Ether. In Greek mythology, Ether referred to the upper sky, space, or heaven, so it's a fitting name considering Earth's upper sky is a radioactive mess. On K23, Sullivan collects water samples before finding out her crew has left without her. This is a dream and also points at her feelings of abandonment. As we'll find out in the film's climax, Sullivan is Augustine's daughter, the one he abandoned so he could focus on his work. She doesn't even know that he's her father, making the ending doubly tragic. The crew of the Ether are on their way home after successfully completing their 2-year mission to K23, finding that the planet can sustain life. The only problem is that they haven't been able to contact Earth for 3 weeks. They've been in a blackout zone and don't know the world has gone to shit. Welcome to 2020. One of the interesting things we learn here is that a flight containing colonists bound for K23 was supposed to be on its way a week ago, but they haven't heard from them either. So things on Earth must have been pretty dire if they were already planning colonizing other planets. At Barbeau, Augustine finds he's not alone. A young girl by the name of Iris has been left behind. Earlier during the evacuation scene, we're given a red herring of a woman unable to find her missing daughter. This was to throw us off since we'll later find Iris is merely a figment of Augustine's imagination. Young Iris only speaks once throughout the entire film, but that's during one of Augustine's dreams. She's given given no voice because he doesn't even know what she sounds like. He never was around. He abandoned her.
I've abandoned my child!
Now he's forced to live with the one person he never wanted to live with. Augustine outlines the dire nature of Ether's situation. He needs to warn them of what happened on Earth so that they can go back to K-23 to essentially restart humanity. As we'll find out a bit later, Iris is pregnant with the captain of the ship's baby. We also get these moments with crew members like Mitchell and Maya who relive these hologram memories with their families, a juxtaposition to Augustine who has none. In fact, Mitchell and Sanchez later decide to go back to Earth using one of the re-entry pods so that they can be with their family, who are presumably dead at this point, rather than make the journey back to K-23. Augustine finds a bunch of birds dying outside the base. The radiation has made its way up earlier than expected. That, combined with the fact the antenna at Barbo isn't strong enough to reach the ether, means he and Iris will have to make the arduous trek to the Lake Hazen weather station, which has a stronger antenna and should be clear of radiation. The crew of the ether also have to make a difficult decision. They've deviated off course, and because their communications aren't working, they'll need to veer off course in order to pick up signals from the beacon they placed on K-23. This will allow them to recalibrate their position and get back on course, but it also puts them into unmapped territory. Augustine and Iris's journey to Lake Hazen is filled with moments that hint at Iris being his daughter, like when he tells her, "We need sleep," but switches his line to, "I need sleep," or when he sees her drawing a picture of what he thinks is her mom.
Is that your mom? I knew a face like that once.
She was as loud as you are quiet.
Iris's silence gets at Augustine.
I wish you'd tell me something about your life.
But she can't say anything because he doesn't know anything about her life. He's never made an effort to be there for her.
If you want her to know about you, you can introduce yourself.
It's only now that he's dying and could lose her forever that this regret washes over him. Iris, in this sense, is a haunting ghost reminding him of his failures as a father. A few scenes later, Augustine loses Iris in a blizzard, yelling out that he's here, but he's never been there for her. He's saved by a vision of Jean, Iris's mother, which quickly turns into that of Iris, as if the mother-daughter connection wasn't evident enough. Back on the ether, the crew must repair the satellite and communication equipment after it was wrecked by flying debris of ice and rock while navigating the unmapped territory. This ends in tragedy when another wave of debris hits the ship and wounds Maya, who later succumbs to her injury. And if things couldn't get any worse, the crew get their first image of Earth with swirling bands of radioactive clouds. They're able to get the communications back up and running, and Augustine confirms that humanity didn't do a good job at looking after the place while they were away. But he has a plan. Before he left for Lake Hazen, he downloaded calculations to have the ether slingshot around Earth and make it back to K-23. The thing is, not all the crew are on board with this plan. Mitchell receives a message from his wife dated 10 days ago telling him that they've been evacuated and that his boys are sick. We'll never know if he ended up making it to her or if she was still alive when he landed, but the important thing here is that he chose to be with his family, even if it meant losing his life. Quite the mirror to Augustine, who has thought of nothing but himself. And that's part of what Augustine's journey is in this movie. For the first time in his life, he is risking himself to save a daughter he never had time for. In other words, he's putting someone else before himself. In arguably the most emotional moment of the film, Augustine has a final transmission with Iris. Both we, the viewer, and Augustine know he's her father, but she does not. She tells him what an amazing man he is for discovering such an incredible world, and that he was the reason she joined the space program in the first place. In his eyes, however, he's not an amazing man. He says he's just the guy who points. And in one of his last lines to her, he says, "It's nice to finally meet her." He's spent his whole life pushing her away, and it's kind of ironic that the closest he's ever been with her is when they're millions of miles apart. He asks her to describe what K-23 was like as we see him venture out into the sunset. She describes how Jupiter seems so close that you could almost touch it as he and Iris touch. At this point, it's fair to assume that Augustine has passed on, as we see that young Iris has disappeared and he's alone in front of the sunset, just like he's been alone his entire life. But with this sad ending comes hope and uncertainty. Iris and Adewale venture back to K-23, the only two remaining crew members on board, with Iris pregnant, ready to restart humanity on a new moon. It's hard not to see the Adam and Eve connection here. They hold hands for a moment before getting back to work. You'll notice that Adewale leaves Iris first, exiting up the left staircase. Iris Iris continues to work for almost 2 minutes before exiting down the right staircase. This was a clear choice by director George Clooney to shoot these end credits this way. There's something he's trying to tell us. Perhaps it's that Iris is doomed to meet the same fate as her father as she drifts further away from Adewale. The camera continues to linger on the empty room as it slowly fades to black, just like the 2 remaining crew members fade into the darkness of space. We're not sure what happens to these 2, but the film's main message of love overcoming all odds does give us hope. Will Iris and Adewale build a new planet free from the war and conflict that consumed it, or is humanity doomed to always drift apart only to be born anew? I want to hear your thoughts below. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and for more bad takes, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember, Daddy loves you very much.